Stargirl, Chapter 19. The Amish in Pennsylvania have a word for it. What's that? I said. Shunning. Or ignoring. I was at Archie's. I had to talk to someone. Well, that's what's happening. The shunnee, so to speak, has gotten himself in Dutch, or in big trouble with the church, so he's excommunicated, or forced to leave. The whole community is in on it, unless he repents or asks for forgiveness. Nobody speaks to him for the rest of his life, not even his family. What? That's right, not even his family. What about his wife? Wife, kids, everybody. His pipe had gone out. He relit it with a stick match. I believe the idea is to drive him away. But some stay, continue working the farm, having dinner. If he passes the salt to his wife, she ignores it. If the bishop had his way, the pigs and chickens would ignore him. It's as if he doesn't exist. I nodded. I know the feeling. We were on the back porch. I stared out at Senor Sagaro. He said, "Does it happen to you when you're not with her?" "No," I said. "At least, I don't think so. When I'm with but when I'm with her, I feel like it's aimed at me too." A small pipe cloud left the corner of his mouth. He smiled. Poor dolphin. Caught in a tuna net, meaning you are somewhere you do not belong. I picked up Barney, the Paleocene rodent skull. I wondered if someone would be holding Cinnamon's head 60 million years from now. So what should I do? Archie waved his hand. Oh, well, that's the easy part. Stay away from her. Your problem's kaput. Or your problem's gone. I sneered. Great advice. You know it's not that easy. He did know, of course, but he wanted me to say it. I told him about the Valentine, the night in her driveway, the walk in the desert. The question that came to mind then sounded silly, but it persisted. Do you believe in enchanted places? He took the pipe from his mouth and looked straight at me. Absolutely. I was confused. But you're a scientist, a man of science, a man of bones. And you can't be up to your eyeballs in bones and not believe in enchanted places. I looked at Barney. I ran my fingertip along the hard line of his 2-inch jaw. Rough, like a cat's tongue. 60 million years in my hands. I looked at Archie. Why can't she be... He finished it for me. Like everybody else? He stood up and stepped down from the porch onto the desert. For his backyard, except for the shed where he kept his digging tools, was the desert. Nature did the landscaping. I put down Barney and joined him. We ambled toward Senor Sagaro. Not like everybody else, I said. Not exactly, not totally. But, Archie... I stopped. He stopped. I turned full face to him. My thoughts and feelings were a wild, conflicting jumble. After staring stupidly at him for a long time, I blurted, "She cheers for the other team." Archie pulled the pipe from his mouth as if to better digest my words, or to better understand me. He raised one finger in the air. He nodded solemnly, or seriously. Ah, yes. We resumed walking. We walked on past the tool shed, past Senor Sagaro. Occasionally, I picked up a stone and flung it toward the purple maricopas. Archie said, almost in a whisper, "She's not easy to put into words, or to describe or talk about, is she?" I shook my head. "An unusual girl," he said. "Could see that from the first. And her parents. As ordinary, in a nice way, as could be. How did this girl come to be? I used to ask myself. Sometimes I thought she should be teaching me. She seems to be in touch with, or to have a better understanding, with something that the rest of us are missing." He looked at me. Hmm? I nodded. He turned the mahogany bowl of his pipe upside down and rapped it with his knuckle. A small stream of ash spilled onto a thicket of dead mesquite. He pointed the pipe stem at me. "You know, there's a place we all inhabit, but we don't much think about it. We're scarcely conscious of it, and it lasts for less than a minute a day." "What's that?" I said. "It's in the morning, for most of us. It's that time, those few seconds when we're coming out of sleep, but we're not really awake yet. For those few seconds, we're something more primitive than what we are about to become. We have just slept the sleep of our most distant ancestors, and something of them and their world still clings to us. For those few moments, we are unformed, uncivilized. We are not the people we know as ourselves, but creatures more in tune with a tree than a keyboard. We are untitled, unnamed, natural, suspended between was and will be, the tadpole before the frog, the worm before the butterfly. We are, for a few brief moments, anything and everything we could be. And then he pulled out his pouch and repacked his pipe. Cherry scent flew. He struck a match. The pipe bowl, like some predator or seducer, drew on the flame. And then, we open our eyes and the day is before us. And he snapped his fingers. We become ourselves. Like so many of Archie's words, they seem not to enter through my ears, but to settle on my skin, there to burrow like tiny eggs waiting in the rain of my maturity, when they would hatch and I would at last understand. So he doesn't totally understand Archie now, but he knows that when he's older, he will. We walked in silence. Yellow blooms had appeared on a cactus, and for some reason, that made me incredibly sad. The purple of the mountains flowed like watercolor. "They hate her," I said. He stopped, looked intently at me. He turned me around and we headed back. He put his arm around my shoulder. "Let's consult Senor Sagara." Shortly, we were standing before the derelict giant, or in front of the dying cactus. I never understood how the Senor managed to convey a sense of dignity, majesty even, considering his stick-rickety, see-through skeleton and the ridiculous, leathery crumple of hide about his foot, his fallen breeches. Archie always spoke to him with respectful formality, as to a judge or visiting dignitary or important person. "Good day, Senor Sagaro," he began. "I believe you know my good friend and charter member of the Loyal Order of the Stone Bone, Mr. Borlaug. He whispered an aside to me. I'm a little rusty, but I think I'll use Spanish now. He prefers it on delicate matters. He turned back to the cactus. Parece, Señor Borlaug, aquí es la víctima de un shunning de sus compañeros estudiantes en el liceo. El objeto principal del shunning es la enamorada del señor Borlaug, nuestra propia señorita Niña Estrella. Él está en búsqueda de preguntas. For my friends who speak Spanish out there, I'm so sorry if I did a terrible job of that, but I tried my best. As Archie spoke, he looked up toward the elf owl hole. Now he turned back to me and whispered, I asked for questions. Questions? I whispered. What about answers? But he was turning from me, tilting his head toward the great cactus, his finger on his lips. Shh. His eyes closed. I waited. At last he nodded and turned back to me. The esteemed señor says there is only one question. What's that? I said. He says it all boils down to this. If I'm translating correctly, whose affection do you value more? Whose love, whose caring do you value more? Hers or the others? The señor says everything will follow from that. I wasn't sure I understood the señor any more than I understood Archie half the time. But I said nothing, and I went home. In bed that night, as the moonlight reached high tide under my chin, I realized that, in fact, I understood the question perfectly. I just didn't want to answer it. Chapter 20. Twice a week, the results of the state basketball tournament were posted on the plywood roadrunner in the courtyard. The surviving teams were into the sectionals now. Then would come the regionals. Then, with only 2 teams left, the big show, the Arizona State Championship. Glendale, the team we had lost to, got bitter, masochistic attention, or mean, angry attention on the Roadrunner, with scores and foot-high numerals as they continued to win and move through the tournament. Meanwhile, Stargirl was involved in a tournament of her own, the oratorical contest. As Micah High's winner, she qualified for the district talk-off, as the Times called it. It took place in the auditorium of Red Rock High School, and lo and behold, or of course, Stargirl won that too. Next stop was the state finals in Phoenix on the 3rd Friday in April. In my homeroom, when the announcement came over the PA about Stargirl winning the district title, I was about to let out a cheer, but I caught myself. Several people booed. Getting ready for the finals, Stargirl practiced on me. Most often, we went into the desert. She did not use notes, nor did her words seem memorized. Each time she gave the speech, it was different. She seemed to insert new material as it popped into her head, or just as she thought about it. She matched her words so perfectly that the speech was not a speech at all, but one creature's voice in the wild, as natural as a raven's call or a coyote's howl at midnight. I sat cross-legged on the ground. Cinnamon sat on me. We listened in rapture. We listened intensely, eagerly. And so, I half believed, did the tumbleweed and cacti, the desert, the mountains, all listening to the girl in the long falling skirt. What a shame, I thought. to pack her performance into a schedule and present it to rows of pushback seats in an auditorium. Once, incredibly, an elf owl landed atop a Saguro not 10 feet from where she was speaking. I paused for a full minute. It paused for a full minute before ducking into its hole. Of course, we did other things too. We walked, we talked, we rode bikes. Though I had my driver's license, I bought a cheap second-hand or used bicycle so I could ride with her. Sometimes she led the way, sometimes I did. Whenever we could, we rode side by side. She was bendable light. She shone around every corner of my day. She taught me to revel, to enjoy the small things. She taught me to wonder. She taught me to laugh. My sense of humor had always measured up to everyone else's. But timid, introverted me, I showed it sparingly. I was a smiler. In her presence, I threw back my head and laughed out loud for the first time in my life. She saw things I had not known there was so much to see. She was forever tugging my arm and saying, "Look." I would look around seeing nothing. "Where?" She would point. "There." In the beginning, I could not see. She might be pointing to a doorway or a person or the sky. But such things were so common to my eyes, so indistinguished, that they register as nothing. I walked in a gray world of nothings. I didn't pay attention to the little things in life. So she would stop and point out that the front door of the house we were passing was blue, and that the last time we had passed it, it had been green. And that as near as she could tell, someone who lived in that house painted the front door a different color several times a year. Or she would whisper to me that the old man sitting alone on the bench at the Tudor Village shopping center was holding his hearing aid in his hand, and he was smiling. And he wore a coat and tie as if he were going somewhere special. And pinned onto his lapel was a tiny American flag. Or she would kneel down and pull me down with her and show me the ants, two of them, lugging the lopped leg of a beetle 20 times their size across the sidewalk. As might two men, they were strong as ants, carry a full-grown tree from one end of town to the other. After a while, I began to see better. When she said, "Look," and I followed her pointing finger, I saw. Eventually, it became a contest. Who would see first? And when I finally did it, said, "Look," and pointed and tugged her sleeve, I was as proud as a first grader with a star on his paper. And there was more to her seeing than that. What she saw, she felt. Her eyes went straight to her heart. She was affected emotionally by what she saw. The old man on the bench, for example, made her cry. The lumberjack ants made her laugh. The door of many colors put her in such a spirit of curiosity that I had to drag her away. She felt she could not proceed with her life until she knocked on such a door. She told me how she would run the Micah Times if she were the editor. Crime would be on page 10. Ants and old men and painted doors on page 1. She made up headlines. Ants haul monster load across vast barren walk. Mystery smile. Old man nods off at Tudor Village. Door begs. Knock me. I told her I wanted to be a TV director. She said she wanted to be a silver lunch truck driver. She wanted to drive a silver truck to sell lunches. Huh? I said. You know, she said. People work all morning. And then it's 12 o'clock. The secretaries in the offices walk out the door. The construction workers put down their hard hats and hammers. And everybody's hungry. And they look up, and there I am. No matter where they are, no matter where they work, I'm there. I have a whole fleet of silver lunch trucks. They go everywhere. Let lunch come to you. That's my slogan. Just seeing my silver lunch truck makes them happy. She described how she would roll up the side panels and everyone would practically faint the cloud of wonderful smells. Hot food, cold food, Chinese, Italian, you named it. Even a salad bar. They can't believe how much food I fit into my truck. No matter where you are, out in the desert, the mountains, even down in the mines, if you want my silver lunch service, I get it to you. I find a way. I tagged along or went with her on missions. One day she bought a small plant, an African violet, in a plastic pot on sale for 99 cents at a drugstore. Who's it for? I asked her. I'm not exactly sure, she said. I just know that someone at an address on Marion Drive is in the hospital for surgery. So I thought, whoever's back home could use a little cheering up. How do you know this stuff? I said. She gave me a mischievous grin. I have my ways. We went to the house on Marion Drive. She reached into the saddle pack, or her storage bag behind her bicycle seat. She pulled out a handful of ribbons. She chose a pale violet one that matched the color of the tiny blossoms and stuffed the remaining ribbons back into the seat pack. She tied the violet ribbon around the pot. I held her back while she set the plant by the front door. Riding away, I said, "Why don't you leave a card or something with your name on it?" The question surprised her. Why should I? Her question surprised me. Well, I don't know. It's just the way people do things. They expect it. They get a gift. They expect to know where it came from. Is that important? Yeah, I guess. I never finished that thought. I never completed what I wanted to say. My tires shuddered or shook as I slammed my bike to a halt. She stopped ahead of me. She backed up. She stared. Leo, what is it? I wagged my head. I grinned. I pointed to her. It was you. Me what? 2 years ago, my birthday. I found a package on my front step, a porcupine necktie. I never found out who gave it to me. She walked her bike alongside mine. She grinned. A mystery. Where did you find it? I said. I didn't. I had my mother make it. She didn't seem to want to dwell on or keep talking about the subject. She started pedaling and we continued on our way. Where were we? She said. Getting credit, I said. What about it? Well, it's nice to get credit. The spokes of her rear wheel spun behind the curtain of her long skirt. She looked like a photograph from 100 years ago. She turned her eyes wide on me. Is it? She said.